Where do writers get their ideas? He loves this one. Now, as readers, we would like to think that stories come about in some sort of burst of inspiration, a cosmic confluence of creativity. And sometimes it does happen that way. But a lot of the time, especially if you're writing movies, TV shows, comic books, or anything where you've got to worry about things like budgets, contracts, IP, sometimes the path that a story or a character takes isn't determined by the muses, but by matters of practicality. For example, most people probably know the reason we don't see the shark in Jaws very often is because Steven Spielberg couldn't get the robot shark to work properly. He decided to keep it off camera as much as possible. He did it for practical reasons, but the result was that the audience had to imagine the shark attacks, making the movie much more frightening than if he had actually shown what was happening. Star Trek made a lot of decisions for similar reasons. The transporter is one of the most iconic pieces of science fiction technology, but the reason it came about was because the producers realized very quickly that it would be way too expensive to keep filming scenes of a shuttlecraft landing and taking off all the time. Then there's the hypospray, a medical device that gives you an inoculation by spraying the medicine through the pores of the skin. If you're the kind of person who's afraid of needles, this would be a godsend, and people are actually trying to invent the real device in the real world. But for TV, it was invented because standards of the 1960s wouldn't allow them to show people using needles, even for legitimate medical purposes. It didn't end with the original series either. 3 decades later, when they were making the movie Star Trek Generations, they realized that the set they had built for the Star Trek The Next Generation television show didn't work quite as well with the dimensions and resolutions of the cinema screen as well as it did with 90s cathode ray TV sets. Their solution? Crash the ship and have an excuse to design a whole new, more cinematic Enterprise bridge for the next movie. Sometimes these decisions are a matter of availability. Bob Odenkirk was filming an episode of How I Met Your Mother and was unavailable for an episode of the TV show Breaking Bad. So they took the job that his character Saul Goodman was supposed to do and created a new character, Mike Ehrmantraut, who was played by Jonathan Banks. Banks' Mike character was in many ways the exact opposite of Bob Odenkirk's Saul Goodman, but he became very popular, and when Odenkirk got his own spin-off series, Better Call Saul, Banks was on the cast as pretty much the co-lead. Budgetary concerns make a lot of these decisions for movies. In the movie Rocky, there's a famous scene where Sylvester Stallone bribes a custodian so that he and Adrian can go into an ice skating rink after it's closed. Sweet, romantic, and it was done because that way they didn't have to pay any extras to be in the background of the scene. Sometimes these decisions are made to hide certain limitations. In Kevin Smith's debut movie Clerks, there's an early scene where Dante finds that vandals have stuffed gum into the padlocks in front of the store and he can't raise the shades, leading to the famous "I assure you we're open" sign. This was done because Kevin Smith could only get permission to film in the convenience store at night. By keeping the shades down, he was able to trick the audience into not realizing that it wasn't daytime when they filmed any of the scenes. Ever wonder why Pixar chose Toy Story as its first feature-length movie? It was because computer animation hadn't really progressed to the point yet where they could do convincing human characters. I mean, just look at Andy from Toy Story 1 compared to Toy Story 3. More realistic and like 10 years older. Choosing to focus on characters made out of plastic instead of flesh and blood made the storytelling easier for the audiences to accept, and Pixar became the powerhouse that it was. But it was still 9 years and 5 movies later before technology progressed to the point where they were comfortable making human beings the star of the show. Marvel runs on this trope sometimes. The X-Men, a classic story of mutant heroes that are a metaphor for the struggle against bigotry and oppression. And it all came about because Stan Lee couldn't think of any more origin stories. Iron Man built his armor to keep his heart beating. Thor was a reimagining of an actual Norse god. The Fantastic Four got their powers from cosmic radiation. The Hulk got his powers from gamma radiation. Spider-Man got his powers from spider radiation. By the time the X-Men finally came around, Stan finally thought, just screw it, they were born with their powers, okay? In the 1970s, the popular TV show The $6 Million Man had a spin-off with a female lead, The Bionic Woman, which was very popular itself. At the time, Marvel had 2 TV shows on the air, The Hulk and Spider-Man, and they were afraid that the network would try to copy The Bionic Woman's success and do female spin-offs that Marvel had no ownership of. So they quickly rushed out comic books starring 2 brand new heroines, She-Hulk and Spider-Woman. And then neither show did a spin-off. When the G.I. Joe franchise was brought back in the 1980s, the toy makers designed the action figures, then they hired Marvel Comics to come up with characters' names, personalities, and a plot to actually put to all of these toys. This included one action figure that was designed specifically as a cost-cutting measure. It was made of all black plastic and required no paint, so it was cheaper to produce than the other action figures. Marvel writer Larry Hama took this character and made him the silent assassin Snake Eyes, one of the most iconic characters ever. And the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe exists because of contractual obligations. In the 90s, Marvel Comics was in financial trouble, and one of the only ways they stayed afloat was by selling the movie and TV rights to all of their characters to anybody with $12 and a pack of Garbage Pail Kids cards. Sometimes this worked out great, like the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies or the Fox X-Men films. Other times you got Daredevil and Ghost Rider. Once Marvel was solvent again, they decided, you know what, we can make movies with our characters better than anybody else can. But at this point, most of the really popular characters had already been licensed out. So they decided to start their cinematic universe with lesser known, less popular characters like Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, Captain America. And you see what happened. Now, of course, Marvel is part of the enormous Disney entertainment empire, and they've gotten the rights back to almost all of their creations in one way or another. So you can see all of those popular characters under the MCU banner again. But the MCU as we know it only exists because Marvel almost went out of business. It would be nice to think that all of our favorite fiction is carefully planned and meticulously mapped out. But a lot of the time, the stuff that we love was just created because the people who were making it were just working with what they had.